We bring in John McClain of the Houston Chronicle, one of my favorite, and I think one of the most talented guys to ever cover the NFL, does incredible work, has been covering the NFL for over 40 years. John, you'd never seen anything like this season as we move closer and closer to the team that you cover, the Houston Texans, starting off the season on the road against the Kansas City Chiefs on September 10th. But I want to jump right into it here. 66 total players have opted out, 17 starters. That represents 2.6% of the guys in the league, meaning while we in the media and certainly people who talk tend to focus a lot on the guys choosing to opt out, another way of looking at it is 97.4% of all NFL players are opting in. Did anything surprise you about the process of the opt-in, the opt-out, as the NFL players have been returning to their respective facilities?
First of all, Clay, thanks for having me on as always. And what surprised me, I thought there wouldn't be as many players opt out. The NFL careers are the shortest. They make the least amount of money. They make the least amount of guaranteed money. And I understand their reasoning. You're either high risk or you got family you're worried about that's high risk at home. The union worked out a deal with the players that was satisfactory with the players, but I thought there might be a handful, and I was way off target. And other than the Patriots, who lost the most, I think other teams would be happy. The Texans, for instance, lost a backup defensive tackle, Eddie Vanderdoes, who I think would have had hard time making the team. And the Chiefs lost like running back Damian Williams, but they got Clyde Edwards-Helaire from LSU, who may be the most versatile back in the draft, and he's probably going to be better than Damian Williams. And a team like the Jets loses C.J. Mosley, who played in 2 games last year after signing a monster contract to leave the Ravens. Now he's out this year. But across the league, there's one team that was hard hit, and that was the Patriots, and I guess that's a surprise.
Do you think Bill Belichick was in any way involved in the Patriots players making that decision, or do you think it's a little bit of a, it's just sort of a trend when guys look around and 2 or 3 guys decide to do it, others think more seriously about it internally in that locker room? What happened with the Patriots that they had such a more substantial impact of players sitting out than others? Do you think it was Brady leaving and going and they just don't think the team's that good? What's the story there in New England?
I think a lot of people said that for them to lose this many, especially this many guys on defense, on top of the defensive players they lost in free agency, they had 7 starters or key members on the NFL's number 1 defense either leave in free agency or opt out. And people are saying, oh, that's Belichick behind it. He's tanking. He wants to lose to get Trevor Lawrence to replace Tom Brady. Anybody knows Belichick knows tanking's not in his system. So, no. I think one of the reasons they lost players, the price of their success. Those guys had won Super Bowl rings. Some of them have won multiple Super Bowl rings. Guys like Dante Hightower and Patrick Chung and Marcus Cannon. Cannon has overcome cancer once when he came out of TCU. I do not blame him one bit. And so I think it was more the other players. I got my ring. Yeah, I got my Super Bowl check, my playoff check, and so I think that made it easier. Maybe deep down Brady leaving had something to do with it, but I think more it was guys. You go into the league, you want to get paid, you want to get a ring, and those guys that have done both decided to opt out. And if you took the $150,000, meaning you're not high risk, but you're worried about somebody in your family, you got to pay that back next year.
Yeah, that is pretty fascinating to think about. You talk to a lot of people around the league, and there's been a lot of ups and downs through the draft, through free agency, all of those different processes. How optimistic are the people that you are talking with about the season taking place and the NFL finding a way to get it done?
2 weeks ago, Clay, everybody was worried about it. They didn't know what they were going to get when they got to their facility. They'd heard a lot about changes. They'd been told a lot about changes that were made. But until they got there, They didn't know. And I think now, and we've interviewed probably 7 or 8 Texans players, all the coaching staff about the Energy Stadium and across the street their practice facility, and they say it's almost unrecognizable on the inside because of all the changes made because of the coronavirus pandemic. And J.J. Watt called it something out of a Terminator movie. But as they have learned how to navigate the maze, the facial recognition doors, new dressing rooms, new cafeterias, places you can't go, they say literally every few steps they have sanitation stations. And now that they're getting familiar with that and they're on the practice field doing conditioning drills and walkthroughs, they feel more confident. Now, what everybody's worried about, they do everything right for 6 days a week. They pay millions of dollars per team to prepare for the coronavirus, and then they play a game. And so until they play the game, and the Texans Chiefs, as you mentioned, are first on September 10th at Arrowhead Stadium, until teams actually play games and sweat, bleed, spit, blow snot on each other, we're not going to know for sure. A lot of players have the option of wearing shields. They're going to. Other players say they will not wear shields. So nobody has a clue, Clay, what the fallout will be until they do it. And the Texans and Chiefs are guinea pigs, and they'll get their test results back quicker than the other teams will because they play earlier. And if anybody tests positive, they'll have longer to come back before the second game. So it's an advantage to play that early game on Thursday night.
What do you think about guys being disciplined enough to stay out of, I don't want to say high risk because I don't think the players are necessarily under high risk, but high infection, maybe we should say, environments, right? I was talking about this with a guy you know well, Chad Withrow, 104.5 The Zone. We were talking about college kids. Well, you remember back in college, if there was a girl who said, I'm going to be somewhere, and you're 18, 19, or 20 years old, and you're interested in that girl, I don't think there's that many college guys that are going to be disciplined enough not to show up where that girl is. Frankly, I don't think there are that many 45-year-old guys, 55-year-old guys, 25-year-old guys, right? Like, that's just the way the male brain works. Do you think these NFL guys with all this money at stake, we've already seen the Marlins and the Cardinals make mistakes in Major League Baseball, are they going to learn, or does everybody think they're invincible and we're going to see a lot of bad decisions made by players? How would you assess this?
Clippers guard Lou Williams is the poster child.
Yeah, that's perfect.
During the coronavirus pandemic, and he's 33 years old and a 14-year veteran. He had an excused absence to go to a funeral. He went to a strip club, Magic City. I know I've been to Atlanta 50 times, Clay, and everybody tells me, go to Magic City for the wings. And next time I go, I'm going there, and I'm going to turn in a $3,000 expense account, see if the Chronicle will expense it for me. But that was the epitome of ignorance and selfishness. And he also cost him 2 games because he was having a quarantine, and they lost the first one to the Lakers by 2 points, with Lou Williams averaging 18.7 points a game. The reigning sixth man have been a difference in 2 points. I'm guessing he would have. So that ignorance and selfishness cost them a game that could be crucial down the line. Now, the biggest deterrent, the NFL's told them, and I don't know how they would know this, say you went to a fraternity party and you're around 50 people and you were on top of them and nobody's wearing masks, and then you come down with COVID-19 and other people that you're around have to, on contact tracing, have to quarantine. You can't say legally you got it at that party. So I think we're going to see lawyers involved here. But the fact is, the rules say you can't go into strip clubs, nightclubs, restaurants, indoor, anything with more than 10 people. And I'm sure players are going to be counting them. And Lou Williams wouldn't have been caught if his buddy hadn't taken his picture and put it on social media. He would have gone back and kept it quiet. So the biggest deterrent is this, Clay, and I'll use this. Bill O'Brien is an example where the Texans stand in front of the big room and telling his players, if you break one of these rules, you will be quarantined, you will miss games, you will not be paid, you could be fined, you could be suspended, and you're going to stand up in front of this room and tell J.J. Watt and Deshaun Watson and Laramie Tunsil and all the leaders on this team why you broke the rules and you risked hurting your teammates and you taking money out of their pockets. I would think, Clay, some of the guys, that would be a deterrent. But as you know, we're talking about 21-year-old multimillionaires, and there's going to be issues around the league. I don't care what kind of rules they have.
Yeah, it is interesting to think about. We're talking to John McClain, Houston Chronicle. I know we talked about this a few weeks ago when you were on with us. What's your expectation for your coverage of the league? You've been covering the NFL for over 40 years. You're an NFL Hall of Famer in that respect. What do you expect for your coverage of the games to look like? What will you do, and how will it compare to past seasons?
Past seasons, the teams report, and then the next day they're on the practice field, and so is the media. And you're there the whole practice during training camp. And after it's over, you interview the coach, you get in a crowd around him, and he's got the background of the team there. And then you stop players, you interview the multiple players, you're right on top of them. Now everything is Zoom in Houston, and there are 10 people in every city that we have to go through COVID-19 testing next week. We have to, like players, pass 3 tests in 4 days to go out there and to watch practice. And then afterward, we'll go into a mobile home that's on the property for us to work if we want to. And what I worry about, and it's an inconvenience, but it's the rules, and I understand it. The next week, Clay, I've got to spend about 8 hours on a Zoom call at Pro Football Hall of Fame. I'm on the seniors committee and the coaches committee. And ordinarily I go to Canton for that. Now it's going to be on a Zoom. Well, the next day I'm ready to go back to the Texans. I can't do it. I got to pass test again 3 out of 4 days. So that, if somebody else would have come in and taken my place on the 10, as far as the actual games, I've asked the teams, have we heard from the league? Do you guys know? As the Houston Chronicle, usually we get 8 credentials for home games at NRG Stadium. We send 3 on the road. I went to Arrowhead Stadium twice last year. If everybody's going to be 6 feet apart, there's a lot of media people who are not going to be able to get into that stadium, NRG Stadium in Houston, or a lot of stadiums because the press box is just not big enough. So I don't know if they're going to have auxiliary press boxes like the Super Bowl, if they're just going to turn down some outlets' request. But that first game, I'll be there. It's going to be on national TV. I don't expect any fans at Arrowhead Stadium, so it's unprecedented. We're going to have players protesting. We're going to have people taking a knee. So you need to be there, because if you lie on TV for that game, by the time they come back from the commercial break, it'll already be all over social media what happened on the kneeling. And so I think you have to be there. But after that, I just don't know.
You've covered this league for a long time, John. I think there are interesting examples kind of looking at what has been going on in what has been a really fun August, just in terms of sheer amount of sports that are out there, with Major League Baseball, NBA, NHL, the golf tournament going on this weekend, the PGA Championship, one of the majors. It seems to me like the NBA is the only league that has said, hey, we're going to make statements politically all season long as we are playing. Major League Baseball had an introductory, it seemed like, political statement, a little bit from the NHL, not very much from the PGA at all. Do you think the NFL is going to be more like the NBA, or do you think they're going to be more like the Major League Baseball, the NHL, and golf in terms of what this season will look like for the league?
You talking about with protesting?
Yes.
I think the NFL will be out there protesting every game. The NFL started with Colin Kaepernick. The NBA used to not kneel, and I was told it was against the rules. Every week on our sports website, TexasSportsNation.com, I get emails that I write in a mailbag with fans saying, I'll never watch the NFL again if they kneel. Everybody has the way they feel about it. I respect everybody's opinion, but I think the NFL is going to be at the forefront again.
And that'll be interesting in and of itself because, as you just mentioned, this is basically a television production. And unlike in years past, like you said, where there's full stadiums and people are making decisions based on what happens or doesn't happen, I'm kind of fascinated. I don't know if you've thought about this very much. What will CBS, Fox, NBC, ESPN, all of the league's television partners decide, because they could dial back their pregame coverage, right? And there aren't even very many people other than you guys in the media who might be there to actually report on what's going on. They're going to find themselves as in an intriguing position as well, because in the past years, it seemed like they dialed back the pregame coverage in an effort to just try to make the television broadcast about television because they didn't want to lose viewers. They got advertisers to keep happy, everything else. That's going to be a fascinating subplot here, particularly because there's no fans present. It's basically a protest staged for television without any actual viewers present.
Great observation, Clay, and something about the networks. They're going to put on every possible commercial they can because the league, every team gets $296 million in TV money, and they're negotiating a new network television contract, an extension, and then a new streaming contract. And if they get $296 million now, no telling what they're going to get down the line. Now, in those negotiations, the networks know that what happens this year is something that will never happen again. I'll guarantee you that first game, because you're going to have Patrick Mahomes, the best and most exciting player in the league, the Chiefs, everybody loves Andy Reid, the Chiefs coming off a Super Bowl, playing at home, empty stadium, protest against Deshaun Watson. Texans won up there 31-24, then choked a 24-0 lead, lost 51-31 in the playoffs. And it's the only game in town on a Thursday night. I'll guarantee you, no telling what those ratings are going to be. I expect them to be the all-time high rating because you've got such a captive audience. And I can't imagine how high it's going to be in Kansas City since 77,000 fans won't be there. And
that's right.
I'm fired up about it because it's unprecedented. I hope we never have to see these circumstances and consequences again, but because it's historic, it's so interesting about how they're pulling it off, how they're going to determine a champion, and I think it's just so exciting to do it. I hate to see it because you wish it'd been normal circumstances, but it is something that everybody, if you're a sports fan, whether you're watching it on TV or not, you're interested in.
We're talking to John McClain at McClain on _on _NFL. You can find him. I'm going to tweet out his handle as soon as the podcast goes out. You can find me on Twitter at Clay Travis. Last couple of questions for you, and I appreciate all the time. You do fantastic work down at the Houston Chronicle. How much, if at all, is the NFL paying attention to Major League Baseball? And I know that Major League Baseball had major issues with the Marlins and now with the Cardinals, but it appears, hopefully, that they are going to basically have all 30 teams back as we go into the weekend. How much is what's going on with Major League Baseball, given the non-bubble environment, being followed closely by the NFL, and how impactful, if at all, is Major League Baseball's season on what they do in the NFL?
They are watching them under a microscope. We talked to J.J. Watt last week, and he said, heck yeah, he's watching in baseball. You know, they're hoping to be able to avoid what happened to the Marlins and the team they played. And, Clay, I'll tell you something else. The Marlins have lost, I think, one game. And what if at the end of the season their winning percentage gets them in the playoffs, so COVID-19 actually would have helped them because they didn't have to play as many games and possibly suffer as many losses. But the NFL is watching them and seeing, are they done with it? With the Marlins and the Cardinals, is that it? Or could it possibly come back? But something that everybody's going to watch the NFL, you can do everything right for 6 days a week. And if you're going to let these guys go out there and bang on each other for 3 hours on Sunday and Monday and Thursday night, you're not going to know the fallout till they do it. It won't surprise me if they don't have a bunch of guys test positive, considering everything they're trying to do for 6 days a week is to keep people away from each other. And that's something that other teams don't have to worry about.
There's no doubt at all. As we leave, let you go here. You are an expert on movies and television as well. I've caught up on Yellowstone. There's a lot of people out there still looking for entertainment options, even with all the sports back. What's something recent that you've watched and you thought, man, this is good, I think more people should be watching?
I told you about Yellowstone the last time.
That's right.
And I told you also about the new Perry Mason last time, which is about to have its final episode, and I had to get into it by watching the first one a second time, and now I'm really into it. But it would have to be your cup of tea, Clay, and it is my wife's, and she got me interested. We love to watch British murder mysteries on PBS, and there's one called Midsummer Murders that goes back years, and we're trying to watch all of them. And if you like old-fashioned murder mysteries, good acting, good writing, and not much killing other than the initial murder, no fights, no guns most of the time. You just use your brain to try to figure it out. It is something that is captivating.
Outstanding, John McClain. I appreciate the time, my man. We'll hope to talk to you again soon. Excited for the NFL season to get closer and closer.
Clay, thank you very much for having me on this morning. I appreciate it as always.
That's John McClain, Houston Chronicle. Go follow him at McClain _on_NFL.